Hi guys, I'm Briggs. I'm here with Foster, Mr. Hurley, and we are going to be talking about his experience in the military. So, would you like to go ahead and just give us a little background on you and what you do?
What I do now,
Yeah,
what
sure.
I've done since the military. Well, when I got out, I went back to school. I'd left before I got my degree. So I went back and finished college at the University of Texas. Then I worked in advertising in New York, California, Texas, kind of back and forth, those countries over the years. I say countries because they felt like different countries in America. Um, and then probably equal time working for companies and for myself.
Mhm.
Uh, I was not active in in the military reserves. I did, I did my time, and I was happy, willing, to do it. But I didn't feel most of the guys that I served with were going to stay in because we were officers. And by the time you finish your flight training, you've got 5 or 6 years in, and they also usually you get a promotion and a pay bump about that time, so people are looking at it like 14 more years, I think I could do that. I couldn't. I like to tell people I did not like the military, but I loved the Navy. I loved being at sea. I loved flying. I loved everything about it, going around the world. I just was not, I'm not good at taking orders, so this was
Yeah.
not going to be a life for me. And plus orders that you question, just that there's that the bureaucracy of it and all. But it was I I had I'm one of the few people. Well, what I want to say clearly right off, I'm sure you'll be talking to guys of different ages, but when I say Vietnam veteran, I always say that I really was in a different war than those guys on the ground were. I mean, I lost friends. We had planes that went down, but it was nothing like. I mean, I got to sleep in my cot at night. Could watch a movie. I wasn't going through what the ground war guys were going through. So, and I never pretend that it was the same, because I know it wasn't. So I think I was freer to have a kinder view maybe of the time, even though I questioned the war, and rules changed all the time. And I mean, we knew right away between the time that I went over in summer of '66 and came back, that's when the all the protests began, mostly because of the guys in my group who'd gone over were coming back saying, this is crazy. This is a pile of shit over here. Whatever they're telling us is one thing, what we're doing is another. And then as they told their friends who hadn't served, that's really when the kids kind of took to the streets, and all that began.
Yeah.
Which I supported, but I never participated. By the time I was out, it was '68, and I just wanted to get my degree and get to New York and get to work.
So let's go back to the beginning.
Sure.
Joining the military. Were you drafted, or did you decide to join?
My plan was, you need to understand, in growing out of the '50s, the mindset of most young men in the early '60s was that you graduated, you did 2 years, maybe in the military, as my brother, my uncle had done that. At that time, I think people kind of questioned if you didn't have military service on your resume.
Mm-hmm.
Now they say, why did you waste your time?
Yeah.
But that's what it was then. And it just, so my plan was to graduate, and I was going to go to OCS. I wasn't even thinking about flying. And then I achieved the dubious distinction of flunking out of the University of Texas my senior year. Not too many people do that. But I partied crazy, and and so I kind of paid the price. So I was sort of out there, and I got my draft notice when I was in Navy boot camp. I thought, I'm just going to do 3 years and just do it and get out, to kind of stay ahead of it, because Kennedy had stopped drafting married men, and so they were reaching into the college ranks at that point.
Yeah.
In '63. So I would have been drafted had I not, joined the Navy, and my life would have been very different.
Yeah. So do you think, if there wasn't draft, do you think you would have joined?
No.
No.
I mean, there was no. I've never been a flag waver, and like, I want to. If we'd been bombed, yeah, maybe. if we'd had some version of a Pearl Harbor, but not just the political stuff that was going on. I thought, well, you're just supposed to do this. This is part of what, being a man. They want to look and see that you served your country,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you recall about the day you enlisted? If you recall anything.
Well, let's see. That day, well, not a lot. I remember the guy's name. His name was Pulsifer. I thought it was a really interesting name. The petty officer that I went and talked to about joining, and I've always wanted to run into him later on, because here sitting in front of him was a young man with 4 years of college. Mm-hmm. That he could have said, that much school, you could be going to an officer program and just you go right down the hall to the reserves. He didn't say that. He wanted his, to tick off. So, and it was on me. I hadn't done my homework. So that's really all I remember about that particular day. And just thinking, oh, brother, there was no sense of like, oh, this is just going to be so cool. I thought, it is what it is. And I was just, it's kind of like, okay, I got to do this because I flunked out, sort of that.
So going off of that, how did you envision life in the Navy before joining?
Well, I knew of all the branches, that was the one that appealed to me the most.
Yeah.
Because I thought I knew that I always loved the water. And I mean, it's not like I did a lot of sailing or anything like that when I was young, but I just thought, it just seemed to me somehow a little more romantic, that I'd be going to different parts of the world maybe.
Yeah.
And I just, I wasn't like a grunt mentality or like, I want a gun. I could have cared less about that.
Yeah. So what do you recall about boot camp? Do you have any stories that you want to share, or just in general what it was like?
Well, I think the most significant part of boot camp was when Kennedy was assassinated. And I'll never remember, everyone knows, there's that thing in their life, if someday, your friends will say, well, where were you with 9/11? But I was standing outside the chow hall, the whole company. We were just kind of waiting our turn to go in and eat.
Yeah. And
our chief petty officer, who was our division commander, kind of came up and had this real rough voice. Said, all right, I want you guys to get excited, but well, president's been shot. And I knew that they were in Dallas, which is where I lived. So I was like, oh God. And it's Texas at that time still is very conservative, but it was a crazy period, man. And I just thought, I'm not surprised that all the places if he'd gone, that somebody would have shot him in Dallas, because they were just kind of really a little out of control then. So that I remember that more than anything. And I remember I was in the Navy choir there in the boot camp, and we went to the Cow Palace, which is a big convention center in Los Angeles, which is where Kennedy had been nominated. And there was a memorial service, and there were several. It was about like a 3-hour deal. So we rode on the bus up there, and I remember that singing it. I had a minute to call my parents and say, you may see me on TV, look, and I'll be in the Navy choir. So we sang the Navy hymn at the end. The rest of it was, I just remember I was very different. These were young men that I wouldn't have had much experience. I mean, most had graduated high school, some had not. Just really, sweet, innocent guys, but just not all that smart,
Yeah.
And I should say not all that educated. And so I was kind of an anomaly to them. So it was kind of nice. And I was older, than most of them, but just by a couple of years. So it was kind of fun. It just, they'd come to me and ask questions, sort of like, because you've been to school, what's it like, and that sort of thing. So I hope that I encouraged some of them to, further their education once they got out.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's pretty, typical, just, the stuff that everybody goes through in boot camp. It's no fun. You just march, you drill, you run, and, and you form there's that friendship that you form there.
Yeah. Kind of like you see in the movies.
Exactly.
So you served in Vietnam. That is that where you served the majority of your service, or?
No. I was there. The Navy on flight operations, we serve it was a shorter period of time. I was there on Yankee, in the Gulf of Tonkin. There were 2 points. There was like Yankee Station and what was it? It wasn't, I think Zulu Station. But most of the operations were in the northern part of the Gulf of Tonkin, and they're in between the Philippines and Vietnam. And Navy operates around the clock. So just as I had it easier than the guys on the ground, Air Force has it a lot easier than the Navy does. They would come home, sleep in their racks. I mean, they're on the base, and they might fly, every other day. So the Navy was flying around the clock. You'd have a 1 day breakdown, then you'd fly all night sessions, sorties, and then half a day off to kind of like adjust, and then you'd fly all day. So I was there on station from August until like early January.
Yeah.
And you're pretty burnt out by that. I mean, you've been flying. I flew 63 combat missions in a short period of time. That amount of time, an Air Force guy would have flown half that,
Mhm.
or Army or anybody else, other than the chopper pilots. That was a whole other thing. Those guys going in.
So, do you want to go into more of what you did and your job as?
Sure. Best I can describe, my plane doesn't really exist anymore, but any current footage you'll see of flight ops operations on an aircraft carrier, the one propeller-driven plane has 2 props and a very thin radar, a little radar antenna on top. It's a smaller version of those really big AWACS Air Force planes. Mm-hmm. This could be on a carrier. My version of that, and I sent you the picture, it had a little dome on it. We got all kinds of names. We were called the Willie Foot. It looked like a flying turtle. And there was a radar antenna inside that little dome. So what I did, I said there was a crew of 5, pilot and co-pilot in front, 2 aircraft controllers in the back. My full title was Airborne Early Warning Evaluator / Air Intercept Controller. What that meant basically was my job on my radar was to identify any airborne threat to the fleet, anything incoming towards the carrier. And if I recognized something, at all times I had 2 F4s mm-hmm. under my control, quote unquote, but to investigate. So if I spotted anything, I would send them over to take a look at what this was, because their radar didn't go nearly as far. Most of the time, really what we were doing was practicing intercepts. I'd fly them like 60 miles apart, turn them around, and they'd take turns, one being the bad guy, one being the good guy. And until the F4 had a counterpart to me, but somebody who'd made a lot better grades in flight school, because he was in jets and not in props, until he could take over on his radar and finish the intercept.
Okay.
So that was it. But there was very little of that. Mostly what I ended up doing was some strike control. If the weather was bad, then I was not involved in where they were going, but keeping track of them. So when they came back out each time, the A4s and the F4s, they would have no idea where the carrier was.
Yeah.
So I'd bring them in and put them in a position then that the carrier could take over and what they call the carrier control approach, and then bring those planes aboard one by one.
Okay. Pretty interesting.
Yeah. You talk about the ultimate video game, but these are live planes, and you're talking to guys, and it could get a little hairy because if somebody's altimeter's off a little bit, I mean, that was the hairiest part of it was like those putting them in their position to hold. You want them 1,000 feet separation, half mile apart, so they can come in one by one. And if that's at night and choppy water, it can get really dicey, as you can imagine.
So what was it like landing on an aircraft carrier?
Oh, it's just such a kick. Taking off, landing's a lot scarier than taking off.
Yeah.
Because this was an older carrier and it was hydraulic. I mean, steam, but they're smoother now. And on our carrier, after each, you'd have to spot the aircraft. You'd move all the aircraft during launching. All the aircraft that were active and going to be used were respotted to the fantail, to the rear of the carrier, and then they're shot off the 2 catapults. Carriers now have 4 catapults, and they can be doing launching and recovering at the same time. You couldn't do it on, up until about 10 years ago. I mean, these carriers they're twice as big as the one I was on, and mine was twice as big as I was on Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was going to be the Coral Sea, and then when Roosevelt died, they commissioned it, so it was built in 1945. So it was old in '66.
Yeah,
and it was then decommissioned, scrapped, and it doesn't exist at all anymore. But landing was a little was hairier, but it's so exciting still to this day. It's I've got, I don't know, thousands of flight hours, and every time I fly, I turn periodically to whoever's next to me in an airplane and say, this is just a miracle. It is just, to me, it's still magic that we're in the air with 10 tons of metal and flying at 40,000 feet. It still just never ceases to thrill me. It's just great.
Yeah.
There's a smaller version of that with manly men doing manly things, aboard a carrier in the Navy and all that stuff. But it was great. It was really great.
Yeah. So my next question is, I mean, obviously you might not want to answer this, but did you see combat?
Not really. 2 times we thought we'd had a missile fired at us, a SAM. We have to stay over the water because radar is it's line of sight, but solid land just repeats as a solid, just this green blur. You couldn't see anything on it, but the water is like black. So if a ship's out there or you see other aircraft, you can track them over water. So we had to stay over water. And there was, nobody was, that Gulf of Tonkin had 75 naval ships in there. Nobody was coming out there, so it wasn't like we had to be looking for, submarines or anything. It just, Vietnam, they didn't have them.
Yeah.
So it's not like we weren't important, because if we were doing, we were doing strategic stuff, but 2 times also sitting in the back, and especially during the day. So to see the radar, there was like we were kind of sealed off from the front of the plane. They called us moles because we had these little windows we had to shut just so we could see the radar screens. It had to be dark in there. And so you couldn't look out and see anything. But I just remember a time or two, one of the pilots talking to the others saying, "What the hell was that?" And they said, that a SAM had, we never got hit, but they'd fired at us.
Yeah.
So that's the closest I came to combat.
Did you ever get any medals or citations that you're especially proud of?
Well, I got air medals, which was pretty automatic. If you flew 20 missions, you got an air medal. It was something, but it wasn't like you'd done anything extraordinary. There was a commendation, and it came after I was out of the Navy. It was maybe not even been a year later. This thing just came in the mail with a citation, and I always wondered, well, I wonder if anybody else in the squadron, got this. Somebody must have. There was, towards the end of our deployment, we had lost one aircraft that had to ditch, which means they had to go into the water. Yeah. They'd lost an engine, they couldn't and they didn't declare emergency soon enough. So they had run low enough on fuel that there wasn't time to respot the deck and all that. So the guys ditched, and not terribly successfully. There were a crew of 5, only 2 survived. And because the thing with ditching is you don't know how to do it. It's just all theoretical, because you can't go out and practice, on old airplanes and just leave them in the water. So I forgot what the first of that question was.
It was
the medals.
Yeah.
And then so then we were down to 2 aircraft, and then one they were really getting beat up because they were older planes. They certainly weren't as old as the carrier, but we were just kind of hanging in there, and they weren't as, it's less glamorous, of course, than the Jets. They don't make a movie about what I did. Even in Top Gun, it was a joke. Tom Cruise is out flying on his own and spots the Russians. That would never happen. He'd only been there because my guy would have said, go over and investigate. But they don't show that because it's not that sexy. But there were, at the end, they were having a lot of trouble with even with the one last aircraft. And a few guys refused to fly, which I to this day, I don't know why they weren't court-martialed. They just said the planes aren't safe. And it was risky, but I continued, I flew. So I think that's why I got the Navy Commendation Medal.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. My sister forgot her keys, so I'm gonna pause.
Sure.
Okay. So what was the food like during your time in the Navy? I've heard rumors that the Navy has better food than
They do. The old, it goes back to even in World War II, the line was the Navy gets the gravy while the Army gets the beans, because Navy ships were delivering food, so they would kind of take, their cut, I suppose. And also I was an officer, so the officer's mess was probably, I don't think it was that much better, than the enlisted, but I thought the food by and large was decent. It wasn't bad. And to this day, the best crab I've ever had in my life was at a naval air station in Brunswick, Maine, and it was a leg of king crab that was, I swear, it was between a foot and 18. It was magnificent. Just a quick little aside, you'll love this. It sort of encapsulates the whole adventure, not just of me, of our involvement in Vietnam. A month before I deployed to East Asia, I was sent to Arctic Survival School. So I was going to the jungle, but the Navy thought, okay, survival, it's kind of like, really? I think their thinking was the biggest part of it was a compound phase where you're captured and then you're interrogated and you're put through stuff. And I guess they figured, even though it was in the cold, it's like interrogation, disinterrogation, wouldn't matter what the temperature was. But it just seemed kind of comical. That's where we were sent,
Quite the opposite of what you experienced later.
Yeah.
Let's see. So relationship wise, what was your relationship with your service members, your fellow service members like?
There were, I guess, 3 guys that I was the closest to.
Yeah.
One we didn't deploy together, but we lived in the same apartment complex, and our wives were friends, and we just did a lot of stuff together. And we were as opposite as night and day. He was this guy with a crazy accent from New York, and I was the kid from Texas, and we were just kind of alien to each other. And so we liked being around each other because our stories were not stories we'd heard before, because we just grew up in very different places and all that. The other 2 were guys that I flew with a lot, and both of them didn't come back. They were killed over there.
Yeah.
They were in that plane that went down.
Oh.
Yeah.
So going back to the present,
Mm-hmm.
Does your military experience still affect your life today? And if it does, how so?
I have a little barometer that I know when if something in my life is, I spend a lot of time meditating, and I've, not because of the military, but I've just sort of, it's just part of my practice. And I have what I call Navy dreams. And I've learned over the years, it's like I'm back in the Navy. It's me, I have a beard and long hair, and it's not a problem, but it's whatever I'm going through. And I realize that they're escape dreams for me. Mm-hmm. Whereas so many guys maybe have nightmares or have bad dreams about it. For me, I've learned to recognize that, oh, what's going on, that I want to be in the Navy, because you didn't have to make any decisions other than doing your job. Your life basically for those 5 years was you weren't like you were doing career planning unless you were planning on staying in. And then you were thinking about, all right, where should I be stationed? What courses should I be taking? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it's only really from that, it's kind of fun that and also just, it's not really an aside. It's one of the things that I feel the best about. And I don't know that many guys can say it, but I truly had a spiritual awakening in the Navy, not a religious awakening, but just being at sea on nights where, I mean, only the closest to it is like where I live in New Mexico in the high desert. The stars are just, it's indescribable what they look like and how close they are. And being on an aircraft, the deck of an aircraft, I'd sleep up there sometimes. On the very front of the carrier, there's something called a cow catcher, and it's just there to basically keep anybody who stumbled off the front of the carrier, you wouldn't fall into the water. But you could get out on there and look down, and you're over the water, and you see the bow breaking the water, and you can see dolphins swimming by. And I would see, there would be certain nights I'd be looking up at this incredible stars, literally looking like where I'm sitting, and here I'm looking down a little bit at you. A star would be below me. If you can imagine walking out anywhere and thinking that you're taller than a star, but just being 200 feet in the air and that star sitting right on the water, and it be that clear 50 miles away. I mean, whatever your vision for stars much further than that, but the light of it, and that you could see the star, and then look down and see bioluminescent life in the water. And it was just, I would have slept out there every night, you know. And so it's like there were Orion, there were just a few constellations that just I sort of formed a personal relationship with. And each time I look at them now, even I kind of remember how long I've been looking at them, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's affected you in that way, but are you still in touch with any of the people that you served with? Or did you
little
contact
yes.
for a while?
There's a couple of guys. We have there was a fellow that I never knew, but he had put together the name of our squadron. It was with the military nomenclature, they have to label and name everything, you know. So my squadron was VAW 12. So V means aviation. So like the carrier was a CVA, that means Combat Aviation Aircraft Carrier. If it's a helicopter carrier, it's got a different name. So VAW meant airborne aviation, and the W was early warning.
Yeah.
And 12 was just because there were 11 other. Now it's an air wing, and it's different. And again, what was the question?
It was if you're still in touch with anyone.
So a guy who'd served 15 years before us kind of put together this newsletter, and periodically, so now my name was on there, so I just got on mailing lists. So there were a couple of guys that I've actually, one of the guys who refused to fly, who went on and he stayed in the Navy and was a commander. And I always thought, how in the hell did that happen? You'd think that would be on your record, But so he and I, we talk once in a while. And I know I would still be in contact with the two guys that died if they were alive.
Yeah.
They didn't. But not much. No, it's not like, I would have gone to a 50th reunion in what it would have been, 2016 maybe. But nobody was interested in doing it. I thought it would be interesting to meet in Norfolk and just kind of see what's happened in our lives in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
But so that's the long answer to not really.
Yeah. So now going more about respect as a veteran, especially during the anti-war era, we'll start with that. When you were serving, did you feel respected back home?
By family, certainly. Most people didn't talk about it. It was a war that, and it's interesting. my guess is you're going to be talking to guys who've served more in Afghanistan and other places that are, than my age and who served in Vietnam. And nobody, most of those veterans really don't talk about it much, except to other veterans.
Yeah.
And it was because it was not a popular war. There was no, we didn't have a, like I said, we didn't have a, there was just this trumped up incident, that Johnson used as justification, but there was no Pearl Harbor and there was no 9/11. It was just like, kind of, why are we there? And nobody wanted to talk about it too much. And so it wasn't, I don't, but it's not like I hide it in any way. But
Yeah.
whenever if I mentioned to somebody, I said, well, when I was in the Navy, and they say, oh, you were in the Navy? But I don't, live with it that much,
Yeah.
Just was there. But in general, I would say yes. Nobody spat on me. I didn't, get any of that. It was, I think people by and large just kind of avoided, unless, they were out and it was a kind of in your face thing, and they were, and it was, real activist, but I didn't run into that much.
So nowadays, if you mention it to someone that you were in the Navy, what is a typical response?
Well, what I get now, what I consider a kind of a half-assed, oh, I'm supposed to say thank you for your service.
Mhm.
I just don't hear much behind it, though.
Yeah.
It's like they're trying to be woke. This is what they're supposed to say. I suppose some people may genuinely, a person or two genuinely,
Mhm.
I know they meant it. The others, it's just kind of like, oh, you're in the Navy, thank you for your service. Most, it's like, so why bother?
Yeah.
I don't get any, no one questions. No one has said, well, do you feel like you wasted your time, or why did you do that, or why didn't you go to Canada, or any of that. It's more, it's sort of a tacit, okay,
It seems like they feel obligated to do so, but don't really mean it. There's no hard.
Yeah, I think if nobody else was saying it, it wouldn't occur to them to.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that there's, again, depending on the age group, it doesn't, the attitude was kind of like, like Trump's, saying, it's military's for losers. Why would you want to do that? When he just, the horrible things that he said when he was over Normandy, and just like, but he's not alone in that. And there's people thinking, why would you waste? And I don't believe that the kids that went to Canada, I don't think that was their attitude. It was just like, this is an illegal war, and I don't feel like dying for my country for this. It's not, I think those same people, again, had there been a Pearl Harbor or 9/11, wouldn't have been run into Canada. They would have been, I just think some of them might, but I think most would have a different attitude. It was just like, if I'd had a choice, I would have said, no, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have joined, but that I had no choice. I'd have taken my chances with the lottery.
Yeah. So, is there something you believe that's the most difficult part of your entire experience as being a veteran? Do you feel as if you're faced with any struggles, maybe from your service?
Yeah, no, I have to say, I guess I'm blessed in that regard. I have no lingering, I had no animosity about any of it. I don't. By and large, I look back on it very fondly, and it was, to me, and it was just this grand adventure. I never got tired of, even when I wasn't flying, I'd go up. There was a part of the carrier where you could get up really high and kind of out of everybody's way, and I'd go up there and I'd kind of strip down my flight suit, and just, I could catch some sun. I had my earplugs, and I would just watch the jets take off and land. And it was like I was like 6 years old. It was just, and I can, to this day, I can smell that aviation fuel, that avgas. It's got this really sweet, heavy, hot smell. Nothing else smells like it. It's not like car fuel or diesel or anything else. It's avgas. It's just with whatever jets,
Yeah.
burn. And I'm assuming they still burn the same thing. And they're just cranked up at full throttle before they take off, so it just fills the air, but it's just kind of blowing past you because they're the ship's running at about 20 knots. And maybe if you got any wind at all, it's a pretty good breeze that's, blowing it past you.
Yeah.
But you get a good whiff of it, with each one. And it's just the roar it was just, yeah.
That's really
I feel really, really lucky that I don't, it's by and large, it's all positive.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that I had to do it, wasn't, but it probably was one of the best things in a way that ever happened to me, because wasn't like I was a lost guy, but I was, let's just say I had a difficult childhood, and it gave me some time to, to grow up. I mean, when I went back to school, I made all A's, so it was like, oh, I'm not dumb. I know I wasn't dumb, but I thought it was kind of like, oh, so if you study, you can make good grades, if you're not partying all the time. So that was,
it's kind of like a period to reevaluate almost.
Yeah, it was. And and to grow up and to lose friends and see all that. But again, it's nothing like, being in a firefight. I can't imagine what I would have done, what I had to do to try to survive. But I'm just so glad that I didn't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's really all my questions. So if you have any stories you want to go through, or if you have any questions.
Oh boy, I don't put stories. If you, I will. I'll tell you one story. This is my favorite Navy story. This is people in my family. I'll say, Foster, tell the story about the when we were going to Japan. We'd been over in not really in the country, but on station for 3 or 4 months, and went in for Liberty into a port that's called Yokosuka, spelled like Yokosuka, but it's Yokosuka, and it's on kind of southeast of the main island, about a 2-hour train ride from Tokyo. Anyway, for a week before we're going in, several of the old timers, most of the enlisted guys, you become friends with some, and the Navy is very big on what they call fraternization, and you're not, you're supposed to keep this thing separate. And it goes back to the days with, mutiny on the bounty and that sort of thing, so there's still some of that still hangs over. But again, if you're on a Navy base, the best music is at the Chiefs Club. It's not at the Officers Club, because some admiral's wife, wants to hear polka music or something. But if you wanted to hear, and then there were friendlier women at the Chiefs Club, because the officers' wives would go there when their husbands, if they wanted to have a date, they wouldn't go to the Officers Club because they knew they'd be seen. At any rate, so we talked to these old chiefs, and they were saying, "Oh man, you got to get a hotzi bath when you get to Japan." And their eyes were just, "Oh, hotzi bath, they're the best." So I went to have a hotzi bath because I'd heard so much about it. And to set this up very quickly, you got a minute?
Yeah, go ahead. I have all the time in the world.
Okay. When you're in the Navy, and you're talking to civilians, you're always aware that, you have to kind of translate what your rank is, because it's different from all the others. So as a second lieutenant in the Army is an ensign in the Navy. And then a first lieutenant, you're a lieutenant junior grade. A captain in the Army is a lieutenant in the Navy. A captain in the Navy is a bird colonel in the Army. So it's just, you just kind of live with just saying, yeah, that's what that is this or that. And it's the same in the enlisted. Whereas if it's a private in the Army, in the Navy, it's like a seaman or a seaman first class or whatever. So there are no privates, there's no private second class or any of that. So with that as background, go into the hotzi bath and walk in, and there are 2 or 3 kinds of hotzi baths. There's the hotzi baths where there's also a little something special waiting for you, at the end of your massage. The others are more like there's huge pools and there's families there. And this was kind of more of an assembly line. The young ladies live in this building. As best as I can recall, it's a square building with open space in the middle. When you walk in, there'd be like 15 young Japanese girls, late teens, early 20s, who have a room that opens out into this open space. But in that room, I guess they live there, they sleep there, but then that's also where they do the massage. So the first part of your visit, and so you pick somebody as you walk in, and they're just standing and smiling, and whoever just kind of looked at me and giggled or whatever, I guess I picked her. But you're thinking this whole time, I know I'm be getting a massage from these girls. I've been at sea a long time. I'm going to be in there naked and short. Just as a man, you're thinking, I do not want to get sexually aroused. This will be really embarrassing. You keep your mind on other things. Do not let this go anywhere other than just stay on the massage. So the young lady gave you a massage, and then it's all pretty clinical, in a way. There wasn't anything sexual about it, but you're still thinking in the back of your mind. So like even in the room, after the massage, you go down for the bath, and you're carrying your valuables in a little plastic bag with a little towel around you. I mean, it's kind of silly. It's almost like the military itself in a way, So there's nothing sexy about any of that other than they're dressed and you aren't. So then we go to a very large room where there is and these rooms are all open. They're tiled on 4 sides, top, bottom, 3 walls, open out into the middle, no wall at all. Mm-hmm. And there's several of those, and the walls don't go all the way to the top between them, so they can talk back and forth. They can hear each other in the other rooms. So there's what am I trying to say? Steam. One of those little cabinets where you sit in and close the doors.
Like the saunas.
Yeah, that's like a little sauna. Yeah. And then there's a big tub.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were 3 stools. So there's one guy that is walking you through in an assembly line. So you take your steam, then you soak in the tub, then you get out and you're washed, and then you go back to the room to dress. So there's 5 guys, just kind of moving through, and you're sort of waiting your turn, and there's 5 girls in there working on it. So I took my soak, got my steam, did my soak. I'm sitting on the little stool, and these girls have got these huge sponges, and there's no monkey business, nothing. They're just scrubbing away. And then she hands me the sponge. And this is, you just have to understand, trust me, that again, my mind, I'm trying to stay out of anything sexual, not thinking. And the girl, she just speaks a little bit of English. So she hands me the sponge, and I'm sure what she said was, wash your privates. And I swear I heard, where are your privates? Which would have been, why would she ask that, But again, so in a very loud voice, in all seriousness, I said, oh, I'm in the Navy. We don't have privates. She started giggling, and then and then all the other girls were giggling. And I know what was happening. The girls in the next room were saying, what happened? What's so funny? What's so funny? She said, oh, and Navy guy just said he had no privates. And this story, now I can hear it. It's going around and around and around because of me. So I single-handedly, with one fell stroke, destroyed the reputation of Navy guys, seafaring men, for centuries. The biggest coxsmen of the world, by saying we have no privates. So, and I want to tell you, I went back 2 more times. They were fighting over me. It's like, oh, they wanted the guy with no privates.
For you.
Yeah, it was very fun. So I was very proud of it. Oh man. And the only other thing I just kind of in passing, there was in the little town outside I spent most of my short time in the Philippines. Mm-hmm. There was a huge naval base at Subic Bay, it's all gone back to the Philippine government now. I think they use it as a shipyard or something. But there were 2 officer clubs there, one for the Navy, the black shoe and the brown shoe. The Navy's divided into, like, the aviation group is the brown shoes, because we could wear, we wore flat boots, but you also had like these little Wellington boots that you could wear. That in the regular surface Navy, it's all spit and polish, and black shoe. And the ongoing battle, of course, between naval officers for aviation, or the guys there are guys who are assigned to that carrier, who are Navy, but they don't fly. They're about just making the ship work and making it run. They think, the only reason that you have a job is because they have the carrier. We felt like the only reason you have a carrier is to support us, because we're the aviation. You wouldn't have a job otherwise. So it's a battle. It's an argument that can't be won. But each of us think we're more important than the other. So that stuff would go on all the time. But we were sort of the bad guys, or the Hellraisers, and the legendary stories about things that happened at officers' clubs were always at the aviation. They were always at the Naval Air Base. They were not at the other place, because no admirals would come up there. I mean, they went to the old school surface Navy kind of thing. But so there were bars in town that were officer bars, and then there were bars that were for enlisted. And at the club, I should call them clubs. And young ladies would come. It's very, very different than what you'd expect in place else. Many of them were like school teachers. They had jobs. But they were there to meet men. But you sort of formed a relationship for the time you were there. And there was no money like for sex or anything, but periodically they would say, would you help with the rent? I mean, there was money exchanged, but it was not like, $20 on the table after, thank you for a night of fun. It was different. You just have to trust me. And they acted differently, and everybody's attitude was. I wouldn't call them prostitutes. I would just say it's no different than a single scene in a way, and yet you understood that you had to help kind of contribute to their rent, something to that effect. So there was one particular club called the Willows, and they pronounced it Willows. So most of us kind of had like a girlfriend or a second wife, while we were there, and I did. And it's beautiful, beautiful young girl. I think about her periodically and just wonder, whatever happened to her and how she's doing. She's trying to picture her at probably 70. I just turned 80, so she's probably, I imagine surely she's 70. I just wonder what her life was like. And it was very sweet. And just one of those little, wartime things.
Yeah.
Kind of never would have met her. And so there were those. But there were all of my best stories somehow involve a woman, So I don't need to bore you with all those, but it was just like, crazy thing that happened in Rio, and part of the fun is like where it was, and and like only in the Navy, kind of thing, whether if you're on duty and stuff's happening and all. But it was grand adventure. It was so for 3 years of the 5 that I was in, I was at sea, and I spent a full year in the Mediterranean, and that's a whole other story there. And that was just. We just went, it was just kind of to show that, part of the 6th Fleet. And so we were in and out of Naples, but it was in several countries around the Mediterranean. And so the Mediterranean version of the hot sea bath was Beirut, was Lebanon. And we didn't know whether or not we were going to get to go have Liberty Call in Lebanon. And again, the old timers were just saying, like, I guess the women there are like incredible, in their every aspect. And they are beautiful. But there was some political stuff going on, so we didn't have Liberty there. So I always kind of wondered. And then, God, it's just been war torn ever since. But anyway, that was. it's sort of the, you're in the Navy, you're off, you're at sea. It's like, stuff is just, you close the little door and you rationalize these things and think, I'm never, where else am I going to have this opportunity?
Yeah.
And I wasn't that happily married anyway, but that still would, even if I had, I'm sure I would have done the same. So I make no excuses for it, but it was, I was young and nobody there to, except me and my conscience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, and I can't really think of anything else to, I don't, if your main thing is a concern kind of over like what's going on now or how,
Yeah, if you want to go
my experience has been, the VA, I don't deal with the VA because they have a salary. If you make a certain amount of money, then the VA doesn't take care of you, which is, it's fine. I understand that. It's more for the guys who are struggling.
Couldn't recover.
Yeah. The VA had, the only thing I ever asked them for was when I went back to school, I got a kind of a stipend for while I was there that last semester. That was very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it paid rent and more. Maybe it was $300 a month, but in '68, that was an apartment was 150, so it was decent money. My wife worked as a secretary, so we were fine with that. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I haven't. There was a veterans group there in Santa Fe, where I live now, and I went for maybe a month, but it's very conservative group. Everybody there's packing guns and they're pretty right wing, and even though the rules were no talk of politics, it invariably would go into it, and they were just so anti-Obama, and I just, after a while, said, I don't want to listen to all this, so I stopped going. But I found that the vast majority of those guys had they were driving nice cars, walking around. They appeared physically fine to me. All of it, nearly all, had some sort of disability payments they were getting, which I just had no respect for them. And they were asking me, said, you ought to, he said, when you're in the Navy, and I told him, there was asbestos on those ships. You should go to a doctor and get them. I said, what is wrong with you people? I said, the Navy doesn't owe me, for that. I mean, if I'd discovered I had asbestos problems, then I would have said, I got it while I was in the Navy. But to just
go out of your way
to make stuff up and look for things, to go in and to get, and I guess you can find a VA doctor who's, be sympathetic. But I didn't thought, I don't have anything in common with these guys. And I didn't, other than the fact that we'd served.
Yeah.
So it's, I don't miss any of that, but it's just, like I said, there are those nights I wake up, I'm just thinking, oh man, just to stand on a carrier deck one more time for flight ops, it just would be great. It really would. It's there's nothing like it. It's the most dangerous non-combatant job in the military, in any of the branches during flight operations on an aircraft carrier. One of the friends that I got lost because a jet blast blew him into the prop of a plane behind us that was turning. So he was just chopped up. It's just, there are places you do not walk. There are times you do not get out of the airplane. You don't step there. If you step there, you're likely to die. Just don't go out of outside those yellow lines.
Yeah.
Because it's highly, highly dangerous. And but it's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah. The rush.
Yeah, it is. So I can't think anything else. I sent you a couple of pictures. I don't know if that was be any help to you.
Those will be very helpful.
Good.
Those.
Good. Yeah. And the two guys are in that. It doesn't matter which ones they are, but the two guys I lost were in the picture, the five of us in that crew. The fact the two guys kneeling in front are the ones that I lost.
Well, thank you for sharing.
You bet.
I appreciate your
Great.
time.
Good luck with your project.
Thank you. It was great meeting you.
You too.
All right. Well, I'm going to end it there.